in threes. It's just the yarn I figured that I could use for an example.
Alright, well, this is going to be the first video of several that we're going to do to explain to you how Alexa figured out how to produce beanies on our own on this wonderful pass-up. What, did we ever figure out what year this thing was? Or no? When it was made?
No, it's
Old.
I was gonna say it's from the 80s, but it might even be the 60s.
Maybe even older. But we got it from an estate sale here in Florida from a guy that used to be in the military, and he did, what was it, like aerodynamics something? Fluid dynamics?
I have no idea.
Craziness. It was craziness. And he knitted a bunch of his wife's clothing, which was pretty cool. And now we have it, and it unfortunately needs to be cleaned, and we haven't done that yet. But
I've done it a little bit.
we've cleaned it a little bit.
On the places that matter.
Gotcha. So, first episode in a series where we're going to explain to you everything that kind of goes into how we make a beanie and all of the intricacies that are involved with it, because there's a little more than you would think, as Alexa has figured out over the last couple months. The first thing that we wanted to talk about is kind of like before we get started actually knitting, because there's some stuff that goes into the yarn itself and kind of your objectives with what you want out of the beanie that are going to matter before you actually get into the process of using the knitting machine. And so those three things would be the weight of the actual yarn, and that is typically the thickness of it and kind of how big it is and how that's going to interact with the knitting machine. So a lot of times you have stuff like this guy right here, which is more of a zero weight that you can see. These are a little thinner typically, and then you'll go up to like, what is this one? More of a 2?
Like a 2 or 3?
2. What can be a pain in the buns with some of these is when they're multi-stranded.
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes, as Alexa figured out, we have to pull an entire skein, which is like this hunk. It's how you kind of talk about the amount of yarn. A skein is just a bundle, basically. We have to pull that entire thing apart when there's multiple strands, and that is a pain in the buns. Pain in the buns. Second thing that we would be getting into is the actual material itself. And like this guy, this bigger one that we just recently got into, is wool. And so typically with some of these, you have to work to make sure that they're not as scratchy, just because they tend to be a little bit more coarse to the hand. Whereas compared to something like cotton, it's going to feel a lot more light to the touch. And a lot of times what a lot of beanies will be made out of is acrylic, which kind of brings us into the last point, which is the fit. What a lot of more mass manufactured companies will do is they will make sure that the yarn is coming from an acrylic base, which means that it's more, it doesn't come naturally. It's
plastic.
It's plastic. There you go. Which means that it's not as good for the earth, it's not going to biodegrade, and they also will make sure that when they're creating it, there's a lot more distance between each thread as it's knitted, which means that the beanie itself is going to be a lot lighter, but what that also means is that it stretches out and won't conform to your head as much over time, which is why when you get some of those beanies that are cheaper, they're going to feel really nice right off the bat, but they're going to stretch out and then get to a point where you're not really going to be able to wear them anymore, which sucks and is what we're trying to stay away from. Cool, so that was the first three little basics that we were going to talk about, and in the next video we're going to get more into prepping the machine itself, and then talking more about the settings that go on to make sure that you're getting a good output, and then kind of what you have to do to make sure that it's coming out correctly, which Alexa found out obviously was adding weight to the tube, and the tube is basically just how the material comes out of the bottom of the knitting machine as it's created, that we would then sew together later. So make sure to check out the next episode.